All right, welcome in everyone. If you don't know her, this is Phoebe or Noodlefish. She recently did our body horror panel that we had yesterday, and now she's going to be doing Anthropology 169, Intro to Omegaverse Studies, Evolution, Reproduction, and Society. Please control pheromones beyond this point. Take it away, Noodlefish.
Thank you. Hello all, and welcome to Anthropology 169, Biology of the Omegaverse. Um, like just mentioned, my name is Phoebe, and I'll be your lecturer this semester. And by semester, I mean the next 90 or so minutes. Hopefully I make it that long. If not, we're in for the ride. Um, for those who may not know, this presentation will approach the Omegaverse as though it were a real species phenomenon. So basically, this whole thing is going to be one big thought experiment in treating fictional biology as a plausible evolutionary system, right? And our task as a quote unquote class is going to be to analyze not what's the symbolic part of the Omegaverse, but what's the biological and social functionality of it, if it were, again, real. This means we'll be exploring possible evolutionary logic, ecological pressures, and cultural structures that would allow such a system to exist successfully. I'd also like to specify that although parts of this presentation could apply to the Omegaverse as a whole, I will be emphasizing BL adjacent or related things as this is CitrusCon, and who doesn't like to talk about men fucking? So, again, everything we will be looking at, intro and basics, origin and evolution, society, culture, and then kin and cultural ideology. We are in for some fun. So a little bit about me, since this is supposed to be similar to a lower division college course. Why don't we start with some introductions? Woo! Icebreaker! I'm joking. I used to hate those. But really, I do feel like I should at least drop some slight personal lore before the lesson, just so that you kind of get a feel for my qualifications as to why I am your lecturer. So, I have my master's degree in evolutionary anthropology and have been reading Omegaverse since I was maybe 12, 11, somewhere around puberty. Though I was a tad late to the party, about 2 years late to be exact. I can still technically say that I was around when the sacred texts were written. And by sacred texts, that brings us into the history. Oh, I am missing a panel. We're stuck looking at my little sea slug while I explain the history of the Omegaverse. I am so sorry. I hope it didn't reorganize itself. That's going to be a pain in the butt for later. Um, so, for those who may need it, here's a brief overview of the Omegaverse basics. The Omegaverse started with a Winchester incest, or Wincest for short, fanfic featuring Sam and Dean from Supernatural. Dean was the Omega in the fic, with Sam being the Alpha, and it was published sometime in 2010, though there have been tropes associated with the Omegaverse published as early as the 1960s, mostly thanks to the Star Trek fandom, which had quite a bit. Coincidentally, there's a panel right after this one called Star Trek Fandom and the Fujo Frontier. It may cover some of these tropes as well as early slash fics. If you're interested in learning about one of the fandoms that helped create the foundation of fanfic as we know it, I highly recommend checking them out. I think it'll be held in Soaking Springs, and it should start literally right after this panel. From there, the sacred scripts were translated and shared on a Chinese website via an Alpha Beta Omega, or just Omegaverse Sherlock fanfic, leading to its appearance in Danmei, And after a few more years, it gained popularity in Japan, where it was finally published in an manga anthology magazine. It was a Fusion Products Omegaverse project. And of course, around 2017, we got to see the first traditionally published Omegaverse novel hit the shelves in the US. Though these typically feature heterosexual couples, and I do believe this book itself was hetero. Um, and it also started quite a bit of drama in both the publishing and fanfic worlds. Its popularity has since grown in general and helped bring the Omegaverse into mainstream media, with it now making TV debuts and live action international dramas, and of course, anime. I think we got our first official Omegaverse anime earlier last year, so there's that. Now we are heading out of the history parts and moving more towards the traits aspect of it all. In the spirit of BL, what does Omegaverse, or why does Omegaverse dominate, or boys love Omegaverse dominate? I'll give everyone a moment to think. We do have 90 minutes, so I can't really rush through it without fearing that I'm going to be way under. Well, according to some researchers and audience members, BL Omegaverse brings a type of fantastical novelty that isn't seen in hetero Omegaverse. With straight Omegaverse, the structure mirrors standard reproduction and leaves very little to the imagination. BL, on the other hand, provides biological novelty and emotional connection while keeping it fantastical enough to enjoy, particularly for the uterus-having audience. And by that, I mean that a majority of the Omegaverse authors and readers, especially BL Omegaverse, identify as women or people with uterus. A uterus? Uteri? I think uteri is the plural. I could just be making words up now. It's been suggested that this subgenre of literature could be used to explore care, control, and consent beyond conventional gender roles. And I'd love to go further into that, but that's not really what this presentation is about. I have, however, provided some articles on the topic for those of you who may want to read some supplemental readings. They are all in the syllabus, which is in the discussion, or the discussion board that I made 20 minutes ago. And peruse at your own leisure. Moving on from the history, again, and focusing on traits. I don't know why I repeated myself. Let's just talk about the fun stuff. And it's all kind of fun, but the stuff that's meant to make the Omegaverse the Omegaverse. Now, within the Omegaverse, there are 3 common designations: alphas, betas, and omegas. There are a few additional ones that have appeared over the years, but these are the main 3. Typically, alphas have a dominant and occasionally aggressive personality. They're incredibly handsome, well-built, think big and beefy, and typically in positions of leadership and experience rut cycles. Omegas usually have a submissive and gentle personality, and they're typically very pretty or have a soft kind of beauty to them. They're slim with curves, and they go through heats in which they become very fertile. Betas are basically normal humans, hormonally stable and varying in build and personality. They kind of work as the mediators between the 2 previous examples. Most individuals start showing signs of their designation around puberty, but of course, you'll always have the odd early or late bloomer thrown in there. Now, please note that there are some variations within works, as authors and fandoms may get creative and put their own twist on things. For example, some works may alter fertility rates or scent intensity and dominance cues for narrative focus and whatnot. There's also some diversity across cultural adaptations reflecting different cultural anxieties. Examples of this are how in Korea webtoons, there's usually more of an emphasis on the hierarchy structures between the designations, whereas in like Japanese doujinshi and manga, it leans more towards like pressure in emotional bonding. Okay, now that's where this slide comes in. All right, so big question time. Why or what would need to happen for a tri-partied system to appear? Any guesses? I'm gonna go with no. A tri-partied system is a system in which there are three categories. So, humans right now, like as we are a bi-party system. We are based off of, just biology, which is very cisnormative, and I apologize for that. But we are typically divided by male and female, right? A tri-party, though, would be three separate categories, and in this case, alpha, beta, omega. Um, so now that that's been explained, uh, the I guess the short answer, is that biology kind of panicked. It's very hard for a tri-party system to appear, which is why we don't really see it in nature unless it's in like mating tactics, right? And so the long answer is that something needed to have gone very, very wrong with reproduction to cause this type of adaptation. Now, one of the possible triggers, and there are many triggers, like they all need to happen, not simultaneously, but all happen in a close enough time frame in which evolution can really start taking its hold. And please remember that evolution, like a short time frame, isn't like a year. In terms of biology, it's usually decades, if not centuries. So, one of the most possible triggers to have started it all is that there would have been an offspring bottleneck, meaning that too many babies weren't making it to adulthood. And this would have caused anything, like literally anything, that increased the number of surviving offspring to start sticking around. Not because evolution wanted it to, because again, evolution doesn't really have a say, but because those carrying the traits are the ones that are surviving long enough to pass them on further. I should also say that because this is kind of a college lecture format, if any of you guys have questions, I will be taking them like in little sections throughout this. Of course, you're free to wait until the Q&A at the end. But if you're really, really curious about something or need an explanation super quickly, my lovely host aide is keeping track, and so we will get to them shortly. Right, so back to the explanation. The process would look something like this. If enough offspring survived to reproductive age, nothing were to change. If they did not, small mutations and behavioral shifts start showing, and people may start getting choosier, right, about their partners. Babies may also start getting sturdier because sturdier babies have a higher likelihood of survival. Parents would invest more, right? Like if your baby could at any moment not make it for whatever reason, you want to know that you did as much as you could to get them to adulthood, or at least to reproductive age, which is what, according to biology and evolution, is said to be our purpose. I don't like that, but we're looking at it from anthropology, and so I'm gonna I do have to say that. Right, so with parents becoming more invested and all that fun stuff, if it's still not enough for the population to rise, for babies to keep making it, with enough pressure, or not with enough pressure, pressure will continue to build. Right? Now, consider maternal mortality rate, right? If we have babies that aren't making it and mothers who are now dying in high amounts, and pregnancy is killing too many carriers, any mutation that reduces total reproductive loss becomes valuable. So simply because those who are alive are able to pass on their genes while those who have passed are not, this helps spread mutation, or any mutation that comes up, to somehow, again. Okay, so summarizing what I should have already said about maternal mortality rates. If they're low, nothing changes. If mortality rates are high, mutations are going to stay. And mutations that increase the amount of bodies that are able to reproduce, and by reproduce, I mean give birth, are also going to rise, right? And so this mutation would now spread gestation across more bodies and thereby lower extinction rates. And with these genes now being spread more, because again, if you have this mutation and you survive and you give birth, now these babies will probably carry these mutations. This is where we start to get weird kind of genetics, right? So at this point, random mutations are just randomly floating about. Because the population is stressed and shrinking, and now one of these mutations seems to allow gestation in bodies that weren't previously involved. So, congratulations! A wild empreg has appeared in the gene pool. Wonderful. We've accomplished all our dreams. We could go home now. In reality, and at first, this would be rare and dangerous and very, very messy. Most carriers would probably die, right? While those that survive get to, again, pass on their genes. Because everything in evolution is always passing on your genes. And over time, gestation stops being random and starts becoming more of a concentrated, or more concentrated into like a subset of bodies that are able to survive it better. I don't know if you know this, and I do go over this a little later on in the presentation, but gestation is hard. Gestation is hard, and it's dangerous in general, right? So this is, with the new subset of bodies surviving, this is when there'd likely be a shift in hormones, and cycles would start to appear with social signals following. Right? It's always biology starts first, and then social starts to change with it. And we are now seeing MPreg moving away from a complete genetic accident to becoming more of a specialization. And these individuals are what we would later call omegas. They would be the ancient ancestors of the omega, if you will. And now that reliable carriers are in the picture, the next obstacle to attack would be efficiency, right? The species would now need individuals who can impregnate those carriers consistently. And selection would favor those with 1, high fertility, 2, stronger mating drives, and 3, traits that secure access to mates. So those with the traits, or those with these traits, would later become what we know as alphas. Right? They would have evolved concurrently with the omega to work with those mutations. Then there comes the final constraint. humans being group animals. We are social creatures. If anyone can get pregnant and does get pregnant, you'd get a demographic disaster, right? Too many dependents with not enough labor to support them. Resources would collapse, not because food would run out, although that is very possible if you live in a hunter-gatherer society, but because care, protection, and coordination would break down with no form of supporting or no form of support to maintain them, right? Like, imagine one person taking care of 40 babies. It's unrealistic, and you're bound to lose babies, which is not what evolution would want. Now, because of this, pregnancy and impregnation would need to be restricted further for the species to, well, survive comfortably, and making it so that only a select portion of the male population can carry and the female population can impregnate. Like it would alphas would basically need to be rare, just as omegas would need to be rare, and others would remain largely unchanged, and especially if the relevant traits, being those that allow for empreg or fempregnation, which is not a word, but I am making it word, which basically is, well, with empreg being male pregnation, fempregnation would be female impregnation, which I don't like it. Femimpregnator, maybe? I gotta rework on that. Anyway, those that are now doing a reproductive act that wasn't originally assigned to their bodies, these traits are now recessive. And these individuals act as, betas start to emerge as stabilizers, right? They are the leftover majority to keep society functioning. And with all of this, we've finally come to the end result, a tri-partied system built under reproductive pressure. And I would like for you all to please give a warm, big welcome to the Omegaverse as we know it. Now that we have designations, MPreg exists, pregnancy is restricted, and society is no longer on the verge of collapse, what now? Well, once reproduction is limited to a subset of population, the main problem stops being survival and starts being access. Who gets to mate with whom and how often? Now this is where intrasexual and intersexual competition take over. For those of you who may not know or need a quick refresher, intrasexual competition is when members of the same sex compete with each other for mates, usually through dominance or fighting, right? Examples of this are, or at least found in nature, are bucks smashing antlers or elephant seals beating the hell out of each other on the beach during mating season. Intersexual competition is kind of different. It's when one group, often the females of the species, do the choosing based off of preferred traits. Now, the classic and quickest, most understood example is the peacock, with big feathers and a lot of pretty colors, right? It's giving pretty femboy at an all-males prison. Now, in the Omegaverse, mate choice tracks less with gender and more with a combination of gender and designation, right? At least for alphas and omegas. And for that reason, I'd like to make a slight adjustment to the above statement and say that instead of, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. That instead, the individuals who can get pregnant are the ones doing the choosing. Now, this would include omegas and any other reproductive capable uterus-having individual, such as some betas and the occasional alpha. And because pregnancy is biologically expensive and dangerous, choosiness is just good risk management. So, how does this play out? In a system like this, the alpha ends up competing almost entirely with other alphas. Other designations are rarely a problem for them as they typically lack strength and size. But what is a problem is access to carriers, to breeders. Being big and beefy with an intimidating presence shuts down competition fast. And that is where their territorial behavior and possessiveness comes in, specifically as a type of mate guarding. And again, if any of these terms are confusing, please let me know. But because our alphas aren't really just jerks by default, right? It's mostly because once you secure access to a carrier, losing that access is costly, and mate retention becomes just as important as mate attraction, right? You would hate to lose your partner to someone else, just in general. If we're talking about it in a sense of biology, though, and we remove, um, and again, apparently in biology, making babies is the most important thing ever. It would be costly for you to lose the thing that would carry your seed. Now, intersexual competition works at the same time as all of this, right? Their physical attractiveness works at the same way that a peacock's feathers do, where physical size and attractiveness signal health, while dominance signals protection and status signals resources. Resources further signal survival for both the pregnant partner and the baby. And sure, romance could be involved, but it would be a bit stupid to not also consider, risk management. There are a few things evolution cares about, but two of them are who survives pregnancy and who survives infancy. Now, if we were to mix in social structure, and then money starts entering the picture, wealth means food, safety, housing, and help. All of these things matter a lot when pregnancy and infant care are risky. So alphas being incredibly wealthy also fits here, at least narratively, in a very weird biological way. Now, we as humans actually already look at stuff like this, right? We look at looks, personality, and finances, and all these things factor into partner choice, at least according to evolutionary theory. Now, alphas just so happen to bundle all of this into one convenient and kind of unfair, yummy package. And honestly, who wouldn't want to be partnered with a rich, hot man who's willing to commit light war crimes to help keep you safe and happy? I know I would. Give me 5. I'd have myself a reverse harem in a second. Now, omegas represent a different role in the same system, right? In large social groups, reproduction is necessary. It's risky and expensive, and all of those things we've already discussed. Omegas fill that role, right? Their bodies, hormones, and social positions center around pregnancy and early childcare. They are high investment reproductive specialists, which is exactly why mate choice matters as much or so much on their end. Now, betas kind of just sit in the background, but they make the whole system, or they make sure that the whole system doesn't really implode on itself, right? They are the majority that keeps labor, coordination, and daily life running while not really being locked into extreme reproductive roles. They stabilize the interdesignation conflict that simply exists outside of it. Now, designations! I want to go back. I want to do a little poll real quick, if you'd let me. I want to know if, ooh, wrong button. I was about to upload a weird photo. If we were in the Omegaverse, what would your designation be? Now, I'm struggling to type because I am slightly, occasionally illiterate. I was actually just having a conversation about that. Yeah, I'm really bad at spelling. Um, never, never ask me to spell check anything, okay? Two more options. I am so sorry. This is taking a moment. There we go. Okay. Now, before we talk about distribution, again, just tell me what you think your designation would be. Now, I'm going to leave this poll up for a couple of seconds. And I should have done this while I was still talking about intersexual competition. And I don't know why I didn't. Ah, okay. I would explain the recessive and dominant difference, but that kind of jumps a little ahead. So to summarize, recessive, whatever, so recessive omega or recessive alpha are ones who display weaker versions of the, I guess, designation traits, right? Whereas dominant would have very strong trait displays of alpha or omega characteristics. Do we end this again? Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'll leave this up for a couple more seconds. Do we have any other questions regarding the difference between recessive and dominant or anything else? Oh, yeah. So like a soft alpha would be a recessive alpha. Well, if soft means they have softer traits, like they're not as big and bulky, like they're more lean and not so, I guess, angular in their shape, like they're not as sharp, they have softer features, then yes. But if you're talking about personality-wise, then no. Uh, well, again, what defines soft alpha for me, or explain what you think soft alpha is for me, Hemlock, please, if possible. Yes, Boot Prince. That should be everyone's life motto and goal. Okay, so I think I've left it up for enough time. I'm going to end the poll. If you haven't gotten to it, I am so very sorry. In 3, 2, 1. All right, so apparently, recessive omega 1. Some of us are lying. Now, based off of designations, 10% of the population, the total population, would be omegas, right? They would be the least common among the designation, with alphas being closer to 15 and betas being the mass majority over the medium, which is 75% or roughly 75%. Somehow both dominant and recessive omega both were the most voted on. And so a lot of us, we're either very much lying or we just have a very high omega population in this class, which is totally fine, very possible. um, right, so with, where was I? Right, the overall benefit for alphas are that they have strength and status and mating priority, which is just access to making and protection benefits, right? But the costs are that there is high competition, such as risks of intersexual conflict, which are just other alphas trying to fight you. And for omegas, the benefits are high fertility and caregiving bonds that that often come with further alloparenting support. Alloparenting is when other people act like a parent with you, not like a step parent, but like they help you with the child rearing. So, for example, when I was younger, because my mother had me as a teen and she was still in high school, my grandparents and my aunts provided a lot of allo-parenting care, right? Whenever she was in class, they were the ones taking care of me until she got back home. Now, the costs, however, being an alpha, are high with very limited autonomy and increased vulnerability during heats. Betas overall have lower stress, they have stable reproduction, and major versatility with their lives. That said, they do have reduced social status. So, although that doesn't, or that in itself, the reduced social status, doesn't quite compare to that of the omegas, it still kind of sucks, right? So, as I mentioned before, betas work as a species stabilizer, and this is because the omega survives via frequency-dependent selection, right? Frequency-dependent selection is a type of selection in which phenotypes that are either common or rare are favored. And alpha-omega sustain advantage while betas dominate numerically from the group balance. Now, a really cool example of something similar to this that we see outside of the Omegaverse is a group of lizards within the Pacific Northwest. The males come in 3 throat color patterns, and each come with their own different form of reproductive strategy, right? Orange males are the strongest and can fight other males for access to the females. The blue males are medium-sized and form really strong pair bonds with their mates, whereas the yellow males are the smallest and rather female-passing, I would say. So they're able to sneak copulation. Now, they're able to do this, just to expand on that a little, because the orange males as well as the blue males don't realize that they're boys. They think they're just other female lizards. And so having another female lizard is, great. You get more coochie, more cloaca, if you will. And that is how the yellow males are able to reproduce. They come in, they say, "Hi, I'm a pretty girl, let me seduce you." And while the other lizard is turned around, they're in bed with their wives. Now, betas being the majority with, again, around 75%, 65 if we really want to be generous of the population, they're the baseline phenotype. And I should change that over. There we go. There's the mouse. Oh. I'm missing another slide. Wow. Yeah, that's not great. We'll just leave it here. Alphas make up about 15%, give or take, and the more prominent among the male are more prominent among the male population than female population, right? Men are more likely to be alpha than women are. Just genetically, think of it as like the X and Y chromosome, right? men are more likely to be colorblind than women simply because they lack an extra X chromosome, which makes them more susceptible to color blindness. If you didn't know, there's a fun fact for you. And lastly, omegas are the rarest of their three designations, again, making up about 12, 10-ish% of the population, and most of which are female, making male omegas the rarest of the three gendered combinations. Now, the adaptive logic behind this is that it kind of prevents system-wide chaos from too many heats and ruts, right? It allows for society to continue mostly uninterrupted. Now, imagine if every alpha and omega were to be more evenly distributed with the betas. Nearly every single industry would take a hit from everyone calling in sick to deal with their heats or calling in for paternity, maternity leave. You know, a lot of the workforce would now be gone, and society would kind of collapse. Not to mention the possible constant baby boom if omegas were to like sync up their heat schedules with each other, you know, kind of like how women can sync up their periods. I would actually really enjoy a fanfic like that if like something happened, maybe the cycle of the moon changed and all the omegas went into heat and all their pheromones were crazy, and so all the alphas just went into a mass rut. Sounds like fun. Can someone write a fanfic about that? Please? Please and thank you. And if you do, tag me somehow. I don't know, find me. But yeah, I'd really like to see the type of universe where that would happen. So, on top of the three designations, there's also the added aspect of dominant and recessive expression. So not all alphas and omegas display their traits equally, as there are phenotype variations depending on genotype, causing difference in pheromone output, appearance, and behavioral drive. Dominant phenotypes. Wait, I do believe I actually have that. I do! Yay! Okay. Where was I? Right. Dominant phenotypes, being dominant alpha and omegas, show strong displays of their designation characteristics, right? Dominant alphas, and again, this is gene expression dominant and not personality trait dominant, right? He's not going to tie you up and call you kitten. He just simply looks big. Dominant alphas would look stronger and act more aggressive or possessive and protective and are incredibly handsome, where dominant omegas appear more soft, right? They're softer, much more beautiful and alluring in general. If they have a recessive phenotype, for either recessive alpha or omega, they show more subtle and hidden aspects of their designation. So maybe the alpha is a little more laid back and not as tall, and the omega being a little more plain looking and not as petite. Of course, there are outliers. After all, nothing stops mutation from happening. And an example of said mutation would be the enigma. Now, these individuals are like ultra-dominant alphas, right, who have the capability of cross-designation reproduction, meaning that they can somehow impregnate alphas regardless of their gender. This designation is incredibly rare and would destabilize the population if it were to grow in numbers. There's also the odd occurrence of someone being misdiagnosed as one of the designations or changing designations later in life as their hormones change. These individuals would have needed to already be genetically predisposed to the new designation via genotype coding. Now, although I only have the phenotypes, up. I wonder if you can see my mouse. Okay, you can. So let's say that someone has a double A and a BA, right? Technically speaking, if they have a combination of these 4 letters right here, genotypically, although they would phenotype, I should probably explain phenotype and genotype. Phenotype is what you look like, right? It's hair color, it's eye color, it's your hair texture. Whereas genotype is the genetic code that makes your hair textured like that, right? Or it controls the color of your eyes. It's the thing in control. And those are usually 4 letters long. So if we have this combination right here, technically speaking, because beta is the most dominant out of all the phenotypes, the person would be beta. But if for whatever reason something hormonally happens, and there's like a hormone shift, it's very possible that the fact that they have 3 A's, which already kind of predisposed them to be alpha, had it not been for this little B. Like if this B were an O instead, they would have been an alpha. So if the B genetics, if beta genetics, for whatever reason, just slowed down a little in control, then this person would now switch from beta to alpha. I hope that made sense. That would, again, be an example of someone who would change later in life due to predisposition. So, and all of that is thanks to polygenetic inheritance, which is a genetic mechanism where multiple independent genes collectively influence a single trait, resulting in a continuous spectrum of variation rather than distinct categories, right? So again, that would be like double A, double B, like literally pick one from each column. And it's not endless, but it's pretty endless. And at least in my mind, the way genetics would work, oh, by the way, you could also double stack these, right? So an enigma would probably have 4 A's, which would genetically be really, really hard to get. I had a slide where it showed all the genetic possibilities, including the enigma, and I don't know why it's not here. I feel like the haunting in my room has decided to take advantage of my laptop and just start deleting things. I'm ranting. I'm so sorry. So, you could be a carrier of or with, all these genetics and whatever, you could be a carrier of something and therefore only have presented as the first designation until something changes your hormones and therefore the recessive genes kick in, effectively changing your phenotype, being, again, the exterior, the way your genes display themselves physically. So again, using hair as an example, when I was a child, I had incredibly straight hair. But once puberty hit, it became frizzy and a wavy mess. And it likes to strangle people in their sleep somehow. And it's only really started to calm down a decade later. I'm hoping it really, really starts to calm down as I continue to age. Anyway, the polygenetic inheritance of the designations and their recessive/dominant possibilities help maintain genetic diversity within the species and to minimize intra-class conflict. Now, heats work nearly the same way as estrus, and in the sense that they're both cycle fertility windows, right? Signaling via pheromones and categorizing them as potential pheromone-based mating systems brought on by hormonal triggers. This means that heats, and ruts are asymmetrical. So basically, an omega will go into heat, releasing their pheromones to draw in nearby alphas, and then that will then trigger the alpha's ruts. Ruts are a result of omegas going into heat, not the other way around. Now, I do know that occasionally you can get an alpha that has so much control over their pheromones or has such pheromone strength that it could force an omega into heat. But usually that has to do more with the fact that the omega is already really, really susceptible to that alpha. Like they're genetically a really, really good match. And then just that alpha being able to have that ability with just, anyone. And it's also important to know that there is ecological timing to these cycles, right? Seasonal synchronization of fertility reduces wasted mating effort and prevents overpopulation or starvation events, which then brings us to sexual conflict theory. I feel like... Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, we're jumping ahead. Ooh. You guys saw nothing! You saw nothing! Oh, how would someone be able to control their pheromones? Good question. I think it would happen as like a really weird happenstance. You know? Like, one day they're doing something weird as kids, and out of nowhere they realize that, they can make their thumb touch their wrist or something like that. It would be really random, and it wouldn't make sense to just about anyone. And if they were to explain it to someone, they wouldn't even be able to explain it. They would just simply know that they can do it. If that makes sense. I don't think that makes sense. But yeah. Right, back to any other questions about anything I just said before I get into sexual conflict theory?
There are some other questions from earlier if you would like.
Oh, yeah! Okay, question time!
Yay! Annie asks, Professor, from an anthropological perspective, what ages for puberty make sense?
Well, if we're considering, the average age of our lifespan being like 76 to 85, I think puberty in a developed society would be closer to 9 and 11 for girls, with boys starting a little later being about 11 to 13. If it's a developing society, because there is a difference, puberty would be then pushed back a few years, and that's because they're not getting typically as many calories as someone from a developed society, right? Food is a little harder, and they're more likely going to still be a little more hunter-gatherer, or at least more agricultural. Like if you lived in the middle of the Amazon, you can't go to Stater Brothers or Aldi's and get yourself chicken from the freezer section. So food scarcity will push back puberty by at least 3 or 4 years.
And Crimson asked, would biology actually try to save us, or is that something we'd hope would happen?
That it's more of an accident. It would definitely be an accident. And it would be because not one, but like a few lucky people already had said mutation, and the mutation was very quick to catch on. But it would take a really long time. Like if something were to happen right now and we were to sit back and hope that biology were to save us, you better hope that people, like scientists, are gene splicing, because we would not see it in our lifetime. At least not naturally through evolution. It would need to be forced.
Zarina asks, so would this mean when omegas are rare, that would be an earlier stage of the mutation?
Kind of. It would be, so it would have taken omegas to evolve, or take them a very long time to evolve in general. And again, many of them would have died. If we're talking about ancient omegas, many of them would have died in during pregnancy, not even in labor. They would have died in pregnancy before they would start dying in labor. Um, and I don't believe that they would ever be able to get to the number, at least population, like population percentage, the same way that, or to the same amount as a beta. And that's simply because, again, society and as a species, we would not be able to sustain it. Not for very long. I hope I answered that question. Did it sound like I answered that question?
It sounded very sciencey.
Oh, okay. Yay!
Hemlock asked if birth rates had declined to the point where biology had to intervene, would society as a whole had to have changed, or would money have been made kinda obsolete?
Mm. So that's assuming that money is already in the picture. So if it were like now, right now, where money is in the picture, um, yeah, money would probably become obsolete. We would start doing trade of some kind, right? Whether that was product trade or services trade. We would go back to things that actually have a stronger meaning. I mean, if we really think about money, money is a construct. It's a social construct. We could very easily get the things we wanted by just bartering if we really wanted to. Um, the other part of that question, I'm sorry.
Would society as a whole had to have changed?
Oh, yeah. No, society would have needed a change. Especially since right now we are mostly a patriarchy. If men started getting pregnant, I can guarantee you obstetrics and like medicine would change almost immediately. You know, like healthcare in itself would be taken far more seriously, at least when it comes down to pregnancy and childbirth.
And then Fanny had a clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Fanny meant what ages make sense for heat presentation versus alpha's rut starting.
Mm. Uh, I would say it would probably be a little later than puberty were to start. So if you were to start puberty at 10, although hormonally your or your genetics and hormones would already be leaning towards whatever your designation is, you wouldn't yourself start to look it for another year or two. I mean, you know how there's that stereotype that boys randomly, like, they start puberty, they're fine, and then one morning they're just like 2 feet taller and they don't know how to use their limbs, so they're constantly tripping over things. It would be like that, where it would be gradual and then very sudden.
Okay, yeah, I think that clarified things for Fanny.
Okay.
Thank you. Empress Marlowe also had a question. Could
Hmm.
predation upon humans be a driving factor for alpha evolution into the type of physiological and behavioral changes typical of their sex?
Yes, actually, if I mean the predation would need to obviously be an external force. Well, actually, it could also be uh intra-group conflict, or intraspecies conflict, I should say, right? But yeah, the bigger and stronger you are, the more likely you're going to be, very protective. And so, like, people tend to let you fuck when you're feeding them and protecting them. And so the genetics and predispositions, behavioral dispositions that would these aggressive protectors would start getting passed on because they would probably be breeding more, and that would start um, really honing in the alpha uh, displays, if that makes sense, the alpha genetics.
And then the last question that I see is, are the things on this Punnett square alleles or chromosomes?
Excellent question. These will be alleles. Yeah, these would be alleles. The other one that I wanted to do, the genotype one, I would have probably had chromosomes added in there as well, just for funsies. But most of the time, when Punnett squares are Punnett squares, I do believe they are alleles. I think. It's been a while since I've done basic biology, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so I will be now going back to sexual conflict theory. We all good? Everything cleared up? Yes. Yes. Okay, cool. So, sexual conflict theory suggests that because males and females of a species often have different evolutionary interests regarding reproduction, traits that are advantageous to one sex frequently reduce the fitness of the other. And again, I know I'm using a lot of male, female, and uh, focuses on two different genders. I apologize. Biology is still very much like that, and I can't wait for it to change, as we already know that there are more than two genders. Right? But uh yeah, because that sounds very gendered and only really applies to betas, I'm going to be adjusting the theory to say that impregnators and those who can get pregnant instead of males and females, right? So you're going to have basically the sperm donors and the ones that could get knocked up. And this is mostly seen with the loss of like autonomy experienced by omegas, um, being the sexual conflict theory where their fitness is reduced because of alphas. And seeing a problem to be solved, at least just evolutionarily, as well as an untapped economic market, suppressants and blockers would be developed as a counter strategy. And of course, this would further create a co-evolutionary arms race between cultural ritual, consent mechanisms within the community, and the pharmaceutical industry, being both like locally and internationally. And with the creation of suppressants and blockers, we are not really giving individuals really, what's the way I want to word this? We're not giving individuals reproductive control. But like with most things within a heavily class society, social status and access stratify who gets to use them, right? Who gets to use what? And a much more well-off omega wouldn't experience the same struggles to get their hands on suppressants as omegas of a much lower economic class. There would also be moral debates over the naturalness of taking these type of medications, right? The repressive nature of the classes that causes these medications to be developed, as well as bodily autonomy and who gets to decide what someone can or cannot do with their bodies is very out of the individual's control. Now, all of which would have some type of cultural ramification. right? Particularly in regard to social implications of predictable and unpredictable cycles. So those who don't have a normal cycle, right? And that's similar to menstruation. Not every omega will have consistent heat cycles. Hormones change brought on by like stress or diet, exercise, even aging can result in fluctuating cycle lengths and strengths. Regulated heat cycles may inspire social taboos, right? Or mating festivals and maybe even heat leave policies. It would all depend on that society. And biological rhythms may also shape labor laws and intimacy norms and eroticized scent rituals among kink communities. That would also be fun to see in a fanfic. Get on it, people. um, Now, because this is CitrusCon, and we're here celebrating BL, what would an Omegaverse panel be if I didn't spend at least a few minutes talking about male pregnancy and plausible biology? By now, we know that male omegas can get pregnant, but what does that anatomically look like? Well, male omegas are born with a reproductive pocket that likely derived from a cloacal-like ancestry. The womb would sit near the posterior pelvic region, but is fully separate from the digestive system. Now, this would be right here, right? It has its own little pocket. And while access to the womb is granted using the back door or anus, at least, internally, there's a split pretty early on with one route leading to the reproductive canal ending at the uterine pocket, while the other heads up the digestive tract. And so a muscular sphincter and a tissue fold would separate the digestive tract from the reproductive canal, and this would be safest for both the mother and the baby, as any reproductive opening that connects to the digestive tract risks infection, miscarriage, and even death of one or both parties involved. Biologically speaking, this setup would make sense as sharing an opening would also reduce the need to invent new anatomy with omegas, and because the separation of the internal pathways would prevent infection and pregnancy loss, selection would strongly favor individuals whose bodies kept this system isolated, right? So here, again, we can enter internally. This little portion would lead up to the intestine. This little pathway would go to the cloacal flap, which is the muscle sphincter or tissue sphincter. And then we have the uterus. Now, despite the muscle or muscular sphincter and tissue fold working as a kind of seal to keep the digestive tract's business, out, the reproductive canal is always accessible, regardless of the omega being in heat. That said, its anatomy changes a little depending on whether or not the individual is currently in or out of their heat cycle. So outside of heat, their reproductive canal would be more narrow with low self-lubrication and kind of just like hormonally asleep. So while access is physically possible, conception isn't really optimal or even possible for some. However, during heat, everything changes, right? Self-lubrication increases, there's an increase in elasticity, and the cervix softens considerably, making it very sperm-friendly environment. The male uterus would be different from that found in their female counterparts, with both male and female omegas experiencing heat cycles driven by ovulation and fertility and, have wombs lined with tissue adapted for implantation and nutrition exchange. The tissue lining that of the male omegas is designed to be reabsorbed rather than shed. So female omegas, however, still menstruate when implantation doesn't occur. So not only do they, being, a female omega, experience heat cycles, but they also get their periods. Now, why their bodies hate them? I don't know. I ask myself that question almost every day. Thankfully, though, all omegas get their heat suppressed by the new pregnancy hormones if they get pregnant. And prolactin and oxytocin increases and testosterone drops in male carriers. I hope everyone enjoyed this little view. We're now moving on to
We do
gestation
have
and birth.
a question.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Empress Marlowe, here with another tough question. And how's the testicle situation on omega males? Because these diagrams have ovaries only, and ovaries and testes are analogous structures.
Yes, okay. So, I don't I don't know how much the audience knows about male anatomy. But did you know that you can kind of push testes up back inside of you if you have them, or if you have a male partner or a partner who has testes, you can kind of just like snug them up in there? I think that it would be kind of similar to that, where they can still fit internally, you know? Now, omegas, male omegas, likely would not be able to produce sperm because their testes would be more ovary-like than testy-like. Not to mention their testosterone levels would be a little lower, right? It wouldn't be optimal for them to still be producing genetic material that can impregnate when they are the ones who should be impregnated. So there may be a little external like lump for them. Like when you get a cat fix, and they remove the testes, but they still kind of have, at least they used to, the technique for neutering a cat has changed. But they used to still kind of maintain a light little, scrotum area. It might end up looking like that because it still is kind of early in their evolution, and so they still do have anatomy similar to that of a sperm producing male.
And during embryonic development, testes move a lot to get into a ball position, and that would put them away from the uterus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, really. And we kind of do talk about in the next slide about all the organs that have to shift because of babies. I hate it. Pregnancy scares me. It's body horror. Pregnancy is body horror. Um, any other questions regarding male pregnancy or the overall reproductive anatomy right here before we move on to gestation and birth? I'm going to assume that's a no. I just saw someone say next. Okay. They yelled at me. Right. So, along with the increase of pregnancy hormones, male omegas also experience physical changes similar to those of pregnant female betas and omegas. Their uterine pocket kind of expands upward and anteriorly. I can never say that word, anteriorly, gradually displacing their surrounding organs. So, if you didn't know, when someone with a uterus gets pregnant, as the uterus expands because the baby's growing, all of the organs kind of start reshuffling and entering your rib cage, more or less. Or, sorry, the pregnant person's rib cage. It's terrifying. That's also why some uterus having individuals, when pregnant, feel like the baby is kind of like shoving their fingers or toes between the ribs. It's because they can. They're literally in there. It's terrifying. And of course, this is, the rearranging of organs is when you start to see the baby bump. Because again, as the baby grows, your organs are reshuffled little by little. Now, to support placental attachment and nutrient exchange between the mother and baby, and I will be using mother to refer to anyone that is capable of birthing. This includes omega males. The body will start developing new blood vessels in the uterine tissue. Hormones would modulate the immune tolerance to prevent rejection of the fetus, particularly in the first trimester. Not sure how much people know about pregnancy. I know I keep saying that, but that's because I don't know how much we know about pregnancy. But I forgot what it's called. It's like RH something. I want to say it's ribosome, but it is not ribosome. It's its own protein. Anyway, it's part of the blood type system. So it's the negative or positive part of if you have A positive or B positive. If your baby has a positive on their blood type while the carrier has a negative, the body could view the baby as an intruder or a parasite or something that just should not be there, and it will start trying to terminate the offspring, which is one of the many reasons why early miscarriages happen in the first trimester. It's because the bodies were just not fully used to each other. Not enough blood transfer, genetic material has transferred just yet for the body to be like, oh yeah, I know you. You're fine. Now, for male omegas, there's also the strain of spinal load shift as the baby grows. And because of that, their center of gravity would now change, and it adds more weight to pelvic pressure, and cardiovascular stress onto the body in general. We need to remember that anatomically speaking, although the male omega is still curvier than, say, male or beta or alpha males, they don't quite have the full hip motion or mobility, elasticity as females of the same designation. Thankfully, though, evolution would have favored omega's strong connective tissue and higher pain tolerances, as well as effective nutrient application, so their bodies would just kind of, be capable of developing these babies, or just as capable as developing these babies as their female counterparts. Birth, though, that would be a whole other monster. I am stuttering now, or slurring. Closer to the end of the third trimester, so late pregnancy late pregnancy hormones would start to surge, and these would trigger some tissue remodeling. Relaxin and prostaglandins? Yes, prostaglandins would soften the connective tissue and thinning the walls and relaxing the surrounding muscle, which would make the reproductive canal more flexible. So it could become a functional birthing passage when the time comes. And in postpartum, these hormones would drop and allow for rapid tissue contraction and healing, resulting in the body going back to its original form, at least internally. Now, birth itself is considered a miracle, Not just because, you're bringing a new life into the world, but because once you realize what the body goes through, you start to understand that it's a miracle that survival is even possible, right? Aside from the pain of pushing something out of you, there are some risks, which, what was I trying to say? Right, some risks are still possible even in the healthiest bodies. And for male omegas, they've had to go through a bit more struggle than those born female, at least in the beginning of their evolution, when the birthing process would have still been like longer in early generations of male omegas. There would have been a high mortality rate being common, as they would have had a more narrow pelvic outlet and were just starting to develop the new anatomy. And so over time, selection would have found its balance between fetal size and pelvic flexibility, similar to how it did for women when humans transitioned to being bipedal, meaning when we transitioned to walking on two legs. And once C-sections were created, and they were for like at least a time more common among male omegas than female omegas, just because they would have had less time to adapt to live birth, right?
Just a 5-minute warning.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah, yeah.
How am I talking this? Okay, so the C-section would have added to the mortality rate just while they were trying to adapt it. And once medical intervention got better, those mortality rates decreased. With life history, something we haven't really discussed yet are the effects MPreg would have on society as a whole, starting with the immediate effects of MPreg, which would require, where is it? There we go. Basically, it would destabilize gender roles, right? It would require strong and partnered support, and their bodies would handle postpartum a little differently. And so partners would start sticking around more, and society would start changing in how they viewed childcare and child rearing, as well as postpartum care to the pregnant bodies. Moving away from biological anthro, we start going into the cultural, and I don't actually think I'm going to be able to finish this if this was 5 minutes. Wow, I really went on a tangent, didn't I? Um, I
I told you you'd
guess
be fine on time.
I know. I guess I could take the few questions, seeing as though I don't think I could start this section and finish it. I could rant about it if you guys want to enter a chat later or stream this later. I'm so sorry. I should not get 2 hours of a panel. I should not. I'm missing slides. Ugh.
We did have an interesting question from Kai, which I think we all want to know by now. How long have you studied this topic?
Omega pregnancy? Um, about 3 weeks, maybe less.
I think they meant the
Um,
whole Omegaverse thing and tying it into biology and
oh,
culture and everything.
that that part was fairly easy, actually. I mean, I would like to thank my master's degree for a lot of the anthro part. I've also had a great knowledge in sexual reproduction because for a while I wanted to be a sexologist. So, and then at some point, a gynecologist and obstetrician. So basically, just my love for sex, sexuality, and reproduction all kind of culminated and smashed into my love of pregnant men. And we got this.
And yeah, I think there are some eager people. I told you this group was going to be ripe with questions. But I
Oh,
think there are some
yay!
eager people that are going to continue this in your discussion panel.
Yes, please do. I am so sorry I ran out of time. I genuinely thought I'd be able to get through everything.
It was great. It was amazing. And yes, you used the education that you rightly got because this is amazing. It's
Yay.
it was so good. Like guys, I came into this not an Omegaverse fan, and now I'm thinking of an Omegaverse fic. Like that's how inspirational this has been. So thank you.
Well,
Nice.
thank you. And again, I hope everyone kind of came out with something new or some new knowledge. I feel like I am over time now. Am I over time now? Oh no, I
Oh,
just
21
barely made
seconds.
it.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
fine.
So again, if y'all want to talk about this more, discussion thread, if you guys literally want me to finish the last couple of things, I don't know how I could do that, but I could figure out how to kidnap a voice channel somehow, maybe, possibly, or I momentarily make a new server to do that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, let me know what you want. I will do what you. I'm here to serve. Take my body.
Oh.
Sorry, a little too far and strong, huh? Well, someone's bound to be into that. Anyway, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your con. Have a great night or morning. Eat well, drink water, and yeah, love you all.
Love you all.